"Take off your shirt," the morgue attendant commanded in a flat, expressionless voice. "Take it off and turn around to face your family." With trembling hands, Samuel painstakingly unbuttoned his white linen shirt and let it slide down his shoulders. A wave of horrified screams and stifled sobs instantly erupted from his sister and niece. The sight was horrifying. Samuel's entire back was gone. The flesh, muscle, and tissue had been meticulously devoured, gnawed away night after night. From the nape of his neck down to his lower spine, his backbone and ribcage were completely exposed, visible under a thin film of dried skin and coagulated blood. The decaying creature stretched its fleshless lips into a hollow grin. "Every night while you slept in my illusion of love, I fed on you. You thought you were the master of the world, Samuel, but you were nothing more than my meal." Welcome to Lob Apalab, your haven for gripping tales, modern fables, and dark legends. If you love stories that send chills down your spine and make you question hidden realities of our world, you're in the right place. If you haven't subscribed yet, join our community right now so you never miss any of our upcoming mystical stories. The story we are about to tell you today begins long before that night of horror. Night had wrapped the outskirts of the city in a blanket of thick, damp fog. Cutting through the heavy silence, the revving engine of a luxury German sedan tore through the darkness. Inside the cabin, bathed in the cool blue and gold glow of the backlit dashboard, Samuel tapped his fingers on the leather steering wheel with poorly hidden self-satisfaction. At 38, he was at the top of his game, wealthy, influential, irresistible. On the center display, his mother's name, Maman Henri, flashed for the 5th time that evening. With a dismissive flick of his wrist, he declined the call. "Still lecturing me about marriage, tradition, and family," he muttered with a bitter laugh. "Why lock myself down with one woman when my money and status let me pick whoever I want every weekend? Women are trophies, and tonight I deserve the best." As he drove deeper down a dimly lit avenue lined with towering trees that cast threatening shadows, a detail caught his eye. Standing beneath the flickering light of a street lamp was a woman's silhouette, completely still. Samuel eased on the brakes, pulling up beside her, and rolled down the tinted window. The young woman possessed striking symmetry, flawless dark skin, and cascading black waves that fell gracefully over her shoulders. She wore a stunning burgundy silk evening gown that hugged her slender frame. "Evening, beautiful," Samuel said, flashing his most confident smile. "A woman as gorgeous as you shouldn't be standing alone out in the cold. Get in, I'll give you a ride." The young woman turned slowly toward him, her lips curving into a hypnotically beautiful smile. When her deep, dark eyes locked onto his, a sudden chill ran straight down his spine. For a fraction of a second, a knot of dread twisted in his stomach, but his bloated ego immediately brushed the warning aside. Without a word, without bargaining or setting conditions, she opened the door and took the passenger seat. As the door clicked shut, an unnaturally cold draft filled the car, carrying a subtle, almost imperceptible scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. "I'm Samuel," he offered, trying to mask the strange nervousness creeping over him. "You can call me Yassine," she replied, her voice so smooth it seemed to echo directly inside his mind. Reassured by her submissive tone, Samuel smiled broader and put the car back in gear. Convinced he had just landed another effortless conquest thanks to his charm and high-end ride, he failed to notice that in the rearview mirror, her reflection looked oddly blurred and out of phase. He had just opened the door of his life to a nightmare beyond what he could imagine.
2 years had passed since that fateful night, and the outside world had completely lost track of Samuel. Once a brilliant, ubiquitous entrepreneur, he had abandoned his offices, delegating business through rare, brief emails. He had retreated behind the high perimeter walls of his estate, turning his villa into an impenetrable fortress. Concerned calls from Maman Henriette and the rest of his family were systematically ignored, dismissed with an annoyed swipe. To Samuel, their attempts to reach out were nothing more than pure jealousy toward his absolute bliss. Inside the residence, bathed in a warm, golden glow, Samuel lived in the firm belief that his days were wrapped in unmatched luxury and comfort. Sunk into plush white leather sofas, he watched Yassine move gracefully around the house. She still wore that stunning burgundy silk gown, moving with effortless elegance. In Samuel's eyes, she was the perfect partner, devoted, quiet, and timelessly beautiful day after day. He was trapped in a sweet captivity, a golden cage where his every desire was anticipated. Yet beneath this illusion of perfection, Samuel's body told a much darker story. In just 2 years, the once athletic 30-something had withered into a shadow of his former self. His broad frame had emaciated to the point where his bones pressed against his white linen shirt. His golden complexion had turned a dull, sickly gray, and deep, dark circles hollowed out his exhausted face. Yet Samuel chalked his physical decline up to past burnout and a simple need for rest. Yassine ruled the space unchallenged. She kept total control over the remote for the heavy wrought iron gate. No visitors entered, no outside eyes penetrated their sanctuary. "They want to tear us apart," Samuel would whisper, staring at the closed shutters, his trembling hand clasping hers. "My family doesn't understand our love. You're the only one keeping me safe, Yassine." Completely consumed by this mystical hold, blinded by an insatiable emotional dependency, he failed to see that the very life was being bled out of him, drop by drop.
The suffocating stillness of the fortress was shattered one Tuesday afternoon by the sharp blare of a taxi horn. Grace, Samuel's 19-year-old niece, had just finished her high school exit exams. Dressed in a customized denim set and fresh white sneakers, backpack slung over one shoulder, she stood boldly outside the tall iron gate. Fed up with her mother's and Maman Henriette's endless worrying, she was determined to force her way in and see the uncle who had become a ghost. Inside, the doorbell startled Samuel. Spotting his niece on the video monitor, his initial impulse was rage. He picked up the intercom to order her away, but Grace held her ground, declaring she wouldn't leave without seeing him. Buckling under the pressure and fearing a scene in the neighborhood, Samuel remotely unlocked the gate, sternly warning her to stay quiet and out of sight. Once inside the paved courtyard, the ordeal was only beginning. Grace was left waiting nearly an hour at the front door under a blistering sun before a metallic click signaled the lock unlatching. The heavy timber door swung open slowly. The moment Grace crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind her with an ominous thud. She was instantly plunged into near-total darkness, hit by an overwhelming wave of foul odor. A suffocating stench of rotting flesh, putrid discharge, and mold filled her nostrils, making her stomach turn. Quickly switching on her phone flashlight, she gasped. The floor wasn't the gleaming marble her uncle used to brag about, but a thick carpet of dust and nauseating trash piled high with organic decay. "Uncle Samuel, what is this? It smells like death in here," she choked out, shielding her face. "Shut up," he barked, his voice raspy. "What smell? There is no smell here. My wife keeps this house immaculate. If you came here to throw insults and disrespect our home, grab your things and get out." Stunned by his fierce denial, Grace followed him in silence to the guest bedroom.
When he pushed the door open, the sight was no less horrifying. Thick cobwebs hung from the corners like mourning veils, and the mattress was decayed, eaten away by moisture and caked in decades of grime. As Samuel walked away, muttering curses, Grace sat on the edge of the infested bed, shivering from cold and confusion. Was she in a living nightmare? How could her uncle, once so refined and meticulous, exist in this dump without noticing a thing? A terrifying certainty settled in her mind. Samuel hadn't just changed, he was under the influence of something that defied reason. By morning, a pale, murky light filtered through the filthy living room windows. Having not slept a wink, Grace decided to go downstairs and announce her immediate departure. But reaching the bottom of the staircase, the sight before her froze her in terror. Gathered around the coffee table, Samuel and two business associates were chatting merrily. Between them were plates overflowing with repulsive rot, blackened meat covered in green blowflies and writhing masses of maggots. All three were picking at the spoiled remains with apparent relish, completely blind to the horror of their feast. Beside them, in her burgundy silk dress, Yassine offered a serene smile. Noticing the young girl, Yassine rose slowly and glided toward her without making a sound. "Did you sleep well, little Grace?" she purred softly. As she laid a bone-chilling hand on Grace's shoulder, the veil lifted for a split second. Up close, Grace wasn't looking at a beautiful woman, but a walking corpse with withered skin, a cracked greenish hue, and glassy, lifeless eyes. The creature's teeth, blackened and exposed, released the stench of a freshly opened grave. Grace shrieked, recoiling backward. "She's dead! She's a corpse! You're eating rot!" she screamed. A sharp crack rang across the room. Samuel had lunged forward and delivered a stinging slap that knocked her to the ground. "Insolent brat!" Samuel roared, his face contorted with rage. "How dare you disrespect my wife and my guests under my roof? You've lost your mind!" Tears streaming down her face, her cheek burning, Grace scrambled for her fallen phone. Desperate to record the nightmare and prove the horror he was living in, she opened the camera and pointed it at the room. That was when the visual shock hit her, sending her head spinning. Through the digital lens on the screen, the scene was magnificent. The living room sparkled. The white leather sofas gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. Yassine appeared as a woman of angelic beauty, and the table was set with steaming rice dishes and golden roasted meats. But whenever Grace lowered her eyes from the screen to look directly at the room, her gaze fell back on mountains of garbage, decaying animal bones, and the decomposing entity. Are you starting to realize the terrifying trap Samuel is caught in? If this story has you hooked and you need to see how this mystical reveal unfolds, take a second to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support keeps L'arbre à Palabre growing. Stay tuned, the scariest part is yet to come. The phone's objective lens captured the spell cast over their minds, while her own eyes pierced straight through the magic. Overcome by terror in the face of this supernatural witchcraft, Grace scrambled to her feet, dropped her phone, and ran for her life across the yard, leaving Samuel convinced his niece had gone insane.
Sobbing, out of breath, and her face bruised, Grace collapsed onto the sofa at her family home. Her mother, Samuel's younger sister, rushed over, horrified by her daughter's state. When Grace finally managed to piece together the narrative of her night, the worm-ridden food, the stench of decay, the phone revealing a flawless illusion, and the woman who was a walking corpse, a terrified silence fell over the room. Without wasting a moment, Samuel's sister initiated an emergency conference call with the entire family. Voices overlapped in disbelief and anger until a hard fist slammed onto a wooden table over the speakerphone.
Mama Henriette had taken the floor. Draped in her grand purple and gold wax print gown, the 70-year-old matriarch listened with icy gravity. Her sharp eyes seemed to pierce the invisible. Having worked in her youth as a cleaner in a large city morgue, she was no stranger to the secrets of the dead and the old mortician's tales of parasitic entities. "What this child is describing isn't madness," Mama Henriette declared, in a tone that left no room for debate. "It is a death spirit, a ghoul that feeds on the flesh and soul of the living. My son has fallen into the hands of a wandering corpse." Blaming herself for allowing her son to isolate himself out of foolish pride, the old woman took command. A rescue party was organized on the spot. Accompanied by her 2 other children, Mama Henriette got into the family car for a heavy night drive, every mile bringing her closer to the fight of her life. By the time they reached the villa, the night was pitch black and oppressive. But the moment Mama Henriette stepped on the pavement a few yards from the property walls, a violent wave of illness hit her. Her legs buckled under sudden nausea and muscle spasms. Pressing a trembling hand against the iron gate, she closed her eyes. Her third eye, honed by prayer and experience, confirmed it. This house was no longer a home, it was an open grave.
Refusing to step inside a house she knew was infested with death, Maman Henriette stopped her children cold. Her mind was made up. She needed undeniable proof and the arsenal of someone accustomed to handling the deceased. She ordered her youngest son to drive her straight to the nearest municipal morgue. Under the pale fluorescent lights of the dreary building, she met an old colleague, a veteran body handler. Listening to her account with sudden solemnity, the man grabbed his leather kit and agreed to come. Back at the villa, the attendant approached the gate. When Samuel, alerted by the commotion, came out into the yard to angrily chase them off, the morgue worker squinted, turned pale, and whispered under his breath, "My God, this man isn't fully among the living anymore. He's already half dead." Ignoring Samuel's curses and furious attempts to block them, the group forced their way inside. Just then, Yassine appeared at the top of the stairs, gliding down toward them with a sweet smile, clad in her burgundy silk gown. But the moment the attendant laid eyes on her, a wave of sheer terror ran through him. Panic-stricken, he tried to turn back and flee the cursed place, but Samuel's brothers grabbed his arms, begging him to help. Summoning his courage, the morgue worker reached into his bag and pulled out a small glass vial containing a mixture of embalming fluids and sacred oils. With a swift, precise motion, he splashed it across Yassine's face and chest. An inhuman, bone-chilling shriek echoed through the house, making the walls tremble. The reaction was instant and horrifying. Right before their eyes, the spell dissolved in seconds. Yassine's flawless skin withered, cracked, and turned a sickly, foul green. Her cheekbones collapsed, her eyes sunk into their sockets until they turned completely glassy, and her lips drew back to expose blackened teeth caked in dried blood. Her burgundy dress was reduced to a tattered rag soaked in pus and fluids of decay. She was nothing more than a walking corpse in advanced putrefaction. Samuel fell to his knees, gasping for air, clutching his face as pure horror took hold of him. His wife's perfect mask had shattered, exposing the monstrous reality underneath.
The spell had ripped open, plunging Samuel into an unbearable reality. Under the harsh light now flooding the space, the golden living room stood revealed as a putrid dump. Piles of trash, heaps of bones, and rotting food surrounded him, giving off a stench that took his breath away. Samuel stared at his filthy hands, suffocating under the weight of disgust and shame.
This creature is the reanimated corpse of a woman who died under tragic circumstances, the morgue attendant explained grimly, pointing to the foul form pinned to the ground by the oil. A ravenous spirit using beauty and desire as bait to feed on arrogant, fertile men. The attendant then turned to Samuel. His eyes no longer held anger, only deep, tragic pity. "Take off your shirt," he ordered. "Take it off and turn around to face your family." With trembling hands, Samuel painstakingly unbuttoned his white linen shirt and let it slide down his shoulders. A wave of horrified screams and stifled sobs instantly erupted from his sister and Grace. Only Maman Henriette stood still, eyes brimming with tears, her knuckles white from clenched fists. The sight was horrifying. Samuel's entire back was gone. The flesh, muscle, and tissue had been meticulously devoured, gnawed away night after night. From his neck down to his lower spine, his backbone and ribcage were completely exposed, visible under a thin film of dried skin and coagulated blood. The decaying creature, though paralyzed by the sacred oil, stretched its fleshless lips into a hollow grin. "Every night while you slept in my illusion of love, I fed on you," Yassine whispered. "You thought you were the master of the world, Samuel, but you were nothing more than my meal." The attendant gently rested a hand on Maman Henriette. His mind was kept under hypnosis while the parasite consumed his life force. The physical damage is too far gone. The infection and spiritual void are irreversible. He has barely 2 days before he completely dries out. Crushed by the certainty of his end, consumed by self-loathing and the shame of sacrificing everything for a lie, Samuel collapsed onto the filthy floor, weeping hopelessly amidst the ruins of his arrogance.
Before we reach the tragic conclusion of this story, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed the tale, subscribe to Labra Palabra, and turn on notifications to support us and never miss our upcoming stories. 2 days later, exactly as predicted, Samuel drew his last ragged breath. A quiet, private burial was held in a secluded cemetery under a heavy sky dripping with a steady rain. Gathered around the fresh earth, the family stood in silence, crushed by the suddenness of their loss. Maman Henriette, her face somber beneath a rain-soaked scarf, stepped to the edge of the grave. She looked down at her son's resting place before turning to the few relatives present. "Arrogance and superficiality are open doors to the darkest curses," she said, her voice heavy with painful wisdom. "When a man turns his back on his roots, scorns his own blood, and chases easy pleasures, thinking he is invincible, he becomes easy prey. Let Samuel's fate serve as a warning. The poison of vice always wears the mask of desire." Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, the heart of another metropolis pulsed through a rainy, neon-lit night. A sleek, black, luxury German sedan with dark-tinted windows slowed to a stop at a red light on a deserted boulevard. The driver, a young businessman sporting a solid gold watch, tapped idly on the steering wheel, looking pleased with his success. On the sidewalk, right under the harsh light of a street lamp, a young woman stood motionless. She was breathtaking. Her burgundy silk evening gown hugged her slender frame, and cascading black waves fell with effortless elegance over her shoulders. Noticing the car, she offered a hypnotically beautiful smile and gave a delicate wave. Captivated by the vision, the driver immediately rolled down his window to call her out.
The young woman stepped softly toward the passenger door, but as her perfect lips parted to answer, an icy breath escaped her mouth, carrying a subtle, undeniable scent of damp earth and rotting flesh. Yassine had found her next victim.